I'm Chris, welcome to my channel. I'm a first year PhD student at King's College London, and I'm guessing you're clicking onto this video because you're considering doing a PhD. I'm going to be speaking to you guys from my perspective and giving you guys some of the things that I considered before actually applying and going for doing a PhD. This will differ depending on whichever subject you're doing, and so I'm speaking specifically from the sciences perspective. I will do another video talking about it from the nurses and allied health professionals perspective because I do have some knowledge and insight on that side of things as well. So I've got my tea. Let's get into it. First things first, a PhD is a terminal degree, so it's the highest qualification you can get to make a significant contribution to your field of study. And the main question is, should you do it straight away after doing an undergraduate, or should you wait and work for a little bit? So there are 3 points at which you can apply for or be eligible to get into a PhD program in the UK. So the first point is after you finish your undergraduate. If you get a really high grade, like a first, you could be considered to do a PhD straight away. Secondly, which is mostly the standard for most people, is that you would do a master's and then go on to doing a PhD program. And the third way is that you do what I did. So you do master's and then work for a little while and then apply to do a PhD. So here's some things to consider. The first thing is really obvious, but it has to be said. Do you love your subject? That is one of the very first things you have to think about, because it is 3 years of you thinking very deeply about a topic and sometimes going off on tangents. And yeah, so do you love the subject? I think that's something that you have to really ask yourself before you go into the PhD program. The second thing is, are you prepared to work independently? Because a PhD program is mostly you working independently with the guide of your supervisors, which is different to what most people would be used to, because the traditional route of education is that you're sort of told what to do, when to do it, and then you just execute that. So are you able to work independently? The other thing to consider is, don't follow the university ranking. When you get to PhD level, university rankings really don't matter at all. You've got to look at the research group that you're going into and understand whether that is the right research group for the type of work that you will be trying to carry out. The other point to consider, which is related to the university ranking point that I made, so with not following the university rankings and just following your research interests and whether the research group is the right place for you to be, I would also advise that you try and find out if it's possible for you to speak to whoever might be your potential supervisor prior to you actually applying. This is an opportunity for you to show them how interested you are in the subject, but also to try and gauge whether you will be able to actually get on with this person that you hope to be working with. The other point to consider is that, do you want to do a PhD that is pre-planned, or do you want to do a PhD that you have come up with entirely on your own? So there's 2 different ways of doing this. Either way, I think you would still need to do a significant amount of work to kind of shape the PhD in what it's going to be towards the end. However, some of the PhDs have a broad topic that's already outlined for you, and then you then go in and do the specifics of whatever topic that would be. Or you would go in and think of a topic yourself and then present that to a potential supervisors as something that you want to work on. The other thing to consider is, what is your end goal? Why are you doing a PhD? If you are just going into it because you are a smart student and you don't really know where to go, then use that time during your PhD to really think about where you want to be after you finish your PhD. And if you are going into it knowing really what you want to do at the end of it, that is a significantly better position for you to be in. However, it can also be limiting, because you would go into it thinking you know everything and you know where you want to be, but obviously things change, and sometimes the trajectory that you thought you would be on might not necessarily be where you end up. So it's good to also slightly keep an open mind. You might meet people there that could surprise you and end up doing a career that you hadn't even planned for, but is more suited to your skills. The other point to consider, which is related to my previous point, is if you are interested in staying in academia, it's really good to spend a bit of investment of time for you to look into what is the possibility of you actually ending up in an academic position, either in that institution that you're going to apply for or another institution within your field. The other thing to consider is what is your current situation financially, because a PhD is a real investment. So you've really got to think, can I afford to do this? In whichever situation you are, you really need to consider whether financially this is really something that you can afford to do. Personally, I think that it's better to go for a PhD program that is funded, because essentially you are going to be there working for them for free in a way. So yeah, I think if you get a funded position, that is really the best way to go. But even so, even when it is funded, often the stipend is not enough to, you know, be living in luxury basically. So should you do a PhD early in life or later on? I think the main advantage of doing a PhD early on is flexibility. You probably don't have a mortgage, you're not married, you don't have kids. Probably, if you're thinking about doing a PhD early, or even if you are committed in one way, you don't have all the other committal things that you would have later on in life. So flexibility, I think, is the main advantage of you doing a PhD early on. Are there any advantages to doing it later in life? So that's the route that I took, and obviously I'm probably biased to this. Doing it later, you probably have got a little bit more resilience in terms of life and just dealing with situations in life, because life throws so many curveballs, and if you're doing it a bit later on in life, you probably are just a little bit more grounded. Also, you're probably not doing it because you're bored and you don't know what else to do. So you've probably spent a lot of time really thinking about, do you have a better idea of your whys, like why you are actually pursuing this? Have a bit more life experience, and so you probably have a better idea of what you want to go into. You are just a little bit more in tune with the broader aspects of the subject that you're going to be doing. The other reason why it is a really good advantage to do it later on in life is that you're probably a little bit more independent in the way you do things, and so it's easier for you to do that. The biggest disadvantage to doing it much later on is the financial impact that it will have on you. And so this is something that I'm trying to navigate myself personally. That's something that you really need to think about, whether it is actually worth doing it, considering where you're going to end up afterwards or even during the process. And it's well worth thinking about either gathering some savings or something like that prior to making that decision to go into doing the PhD. And the other thing that isn't talked about enough is that whilst you're doing a PhD, if you're coming from a working environment, you will end up in a position where you're not able to pay into your pension, and so that's something that you need to consider, making a plan for paying into your pensions while you're doing your PhD, or just having some sort of plan. That's it, guys. That's my personal opinion of things that you should consider if you're thinking about doing a PhD early or later on in life. This was more biased to later on in life, I realized that, because I am in that position. If anyone is doing it earlier on and you can think of more points of why it would be advantageous or disadvantageous to do it early on, please let me know in the comments below and let's have a dialogue about that. I'm really interested in having a good chat with you guys about this. And if you liked this video and found it helpful, don't forget to share, like, comment, and also consider subscribing to join the gang. So yeah, I'll see you in my next video, guys. Thank you. Bye.